Hi, everybody. This is Mark Smith with Fantry Life Coaches, and I'm going to be co-hosting tonight via messaging with my wife, Linda Smith, who doesn't look like somebody's here. There's 3 people here. Welcome. But yeah, Renda's going to be messaging in and saying wise things as we move along tonight. Tonight, we're going to be on the topic of healing childhood wounds through coupleship. Back on the 17th of December, Renda and I did a live stream show on that very same topic, healing childhood wounds through coupleship part 1. This is part 2. So, I don't know if everybody has noticed it, but we have, she's asking me if we've started yet. I should have told her. Yep. I don't know if you've noticed the design. There's Mr. Polly in the back with his diaper on. Unfortunately, he has to wear diapers. Hi, Sarah. Hi, Richard. Welcome. Yeah, we switched to my new logo, which is, I don't know if you can see it by looking at the channel that you're looking at, but it's a tree that has all the leaves off on one side. And the reason that I did that was simply I wanted a family tree that would represent. Hi, Rose Campion. I know you. It has been a while. Hello. But I wanted a family tree that would represent narcissistic abuse. And I'm taking off my socks because I'm hot. Now I'm going to be cold. I think it's sort of cool, the new logo, because I wanted something that would represent the pain that we go through. Anybody who's been through narcissistic abuse has been through some pretty horrific pain, and it devastates you emotionally, financially, in so many ways, and it's devastation. And I wanted the logo to represent some of the pain of devastation. So Sarah says she can't see the logo, but she's sure it's great. It's sort of cool. I like it. It's sort of cool. So I'm still waiting for my wife to show up. Hey, there she is. Hi, honey. She's packing her wrench. So that's cool. So I'm going to give people a chance to get here. By the way, in 2 weeks on St. Patty's Day, Jerry Wise is going. Yeah, Polly's in his bed. Looks like he just crashed. He was awake just a second ago. So I don't know how long Mr. Polly is for this world. I think he's getting close to the end, unfortunately. So, I'm going to turn this light off here. But yeah, on St. Patty's Day in 2 weeks from today, Jerry Wise is going to be speaking on a topic unknown. Hi, Soren. How's it going? It's going sort of rough, to be honest with you. I know many of you you're not in a relationship right now, but just about all of you have been in one at one point. And this is how most of us get most of our emotional healing done, is unfortunately we marry people who are like the people who raised us. And I wish it wasn't that way, but it is that way. And so even if you aren't in a relationship, this topic will speak to you, I think, because I know most people, unless they're really in a ton of pain historically, most people would like to be in a relationship. They would like to be in a happy relationship. And this is how you get the work done, is basically the theme of the book, Getting the Love You Want by Harville Hendricks, the Imago Therapy. When Jerry talks, and I know he's brilliant, he usually is quoting various books that he's read recently. And he's got me, actually, I've been reading a family systems book. But that's just sort of Jerry's style, is he's a teacher and he teaches things. But with me, in the Bible, in the New Testament, St. Peter was approached by somebody, I think, wanting taxes. And he said, "Silver and gold have I none, but such as I have, give I thee." And that's sort of with my approach, is I can share with you. Generally, it's not from a book. It's generally from the work that's been going on in my life. So Soren says he's been avoiding relationship like the goddamn plague since he found out the truth of you marry your issues. And he says, avoidance, baby. My wife says my head is cut off. Okay. So that's not good to have a cut off head. Is that better, honey? I didn't know my head was cut off. Is that better? Is my head intact now? Yes, she says. Okay. So, silver and gold have I none, such as I have, give I thee. Soren says, avoidance, baby, has cut down the steady flow of batshit crazy women. Okay, so my wife says that my head is no longer cut off. That's good to not have a cut off head. So I want to share with you a little bit about Renda and I, and the work that we're doing with each other. Is that okay, honey, if I share a little bit about our story? Jump in and type. I need your support here tonight, hon. Sarah says, batshit crazy is actually my husband's name, my ex-husband's name, husband's ex's name. I'm getting it right here. Your husband's ex's name is batshit crazy. That's actually her name. Okay. So our beginning, Renda and I, started in 2015 when I had gone through a shattering in April of 2015. And most of you, many of you who joined this channel, joined it right around that time. That's when I made a lot of videos that were pretty popular. I made a video about borderline moms, again, talking about my own borderline mother. Soren says, it's been 5 years. Can't believe it. It'll be April. It'll be 5 years. So Soren, you've been around for a while. You saw that sort of play out. So Renda says she was very codependent, and a big smiley face. So I was shattered a long time. I was shattered by being in a relationship with somebody who was unfaithful from pretty much the time we started. And then she sat me down and told me about it in great detail. And that is very traumatizing, very shattering. And but what I thought was God in heaven had dropped an angel out of heaven just for me. And her name was Renda Jo. And Renda was the most loving, kind, selfless, sweet, gentle, other-centered individual that I had ever met. And I just actually fell in love with her. The foreigner says, Guten Abend. Are you coming from Germany, foreigner? Sarah says, Renda is the best. So for 2 years, I was broken and oblivious. Katie Swan says, I wish I knew how to heal from narcissistic abuse. We'll come back to you, Katie. How to heal. I got a note. Like I said, hi, Suzanne. Yeah, greetings from Germany. Cool. I love how this community that people join from other countries. How cool is that? That is just so cool that we live in a world where people can join community and talk about recovery from all over the world. I think that's amazing. If you're from another country, sign in and let us know what country you're from. Hey, LaDawn, welcome. So, Katie, I was sharing with the group that and Katie is also talking about wanting to heal her childhood wounds. Foreigner says that me and Jerry have changed their life. Well, cool. We're just being who we are. Hey, Jill again. People are showing up here all of a sudden. Soren is from Vermont. It's pretty foreign there. Richard Wood is an expatriate living in Canada. So, mein Mutter kommt aus Potsdam. His mother comes from Potsdam. Rose. That's Rose. I thought that was the German guy, but it's Rose. Hi, hey Rose. Mein Mutter kommt from Potsdam. So everything was hard in 2015 because of the narcissistic abuse. Norway. That's so cool. Is it Trini? Am I saying it right? Standerhollen. That sounds like a good Norwegian name. She loves our channel and our wonderful content. Cool. So in 2017, Renda Joe and I got married on the 7th day of May. And Guatemala, Amanda, wow. Norway, Germany, and Guatemala. That is so awesome. Fleece Delicate says hi. So we got married and we bought a house in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Foreigner says, I was raised by a narcissistic father, lived with him 22 years, and then married a narcissistic woman. And I didn't know what was wrong. I was convinced that it was me who was the only problem. Jilligan says that our wedding day is her birthday. So that's cool. So what happened then about the time, or my wife says a little bit earlier, about the time that we moved to Myrtle Beach, about the time we got married, she quit being codependent on me. And she became somebody who had a sense of self, was more assertive. Honey, can you check in and say a little bit about your transition from codependency to being healthier? I just had a client tonight who, shucks, that damn codependency, she says. People ask me, shouldn't two mental health professionals be able to fix their marriage? And Renda says being codependent wasn't really getting her needs met. Braden James says, hi, Mark. Wanted to let you know that you remind me it's cool to be kind and also not take crap off of people. Love you. Good content here. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. I really do. So, not all couples are created equally. And when many of us, like Foreigner was sharing just a little bit ago, many of us had really narcissistic parents. I believe my mother was borderline, and she was a rager, and she was a food addict, and she would lie, and she would cheat on my dad. But mainly what stood out was her raging. Soren says that he learned that one the hard way too, that codependency was always his problem, and his psychologist got him to see that it was difficult to acknowledge it. So Rose says, yes, narcissistic parents. You guys might be surprised, but most of my clients don't have narcissistic parents. They have normally dysfunctional parents, but not as scary and hurtful as somebody who's narcissistic. But we're the unlucky ones, I guess. we're the unlucky ones, where there's just a scary amount of abandonment and a scary amount of abuse. Welcome, Sharon. She just finished a good book on codependency called Repeat After Me by Claudia Black. So Renda says that she was raised by a very narcissistic mother. Renda's mother was scary and dangerous and hurtful. Some of you who've watched some of her videos on her mother know just how scary that she was. Renda says that looks like a good book. She's going to check it out. So, yeah, I was just given a woman's feedback tonight, her feedback session, and she got to the end and she goes, "Isn't anybody happy?" And I said, "Yeah, you can be happy if you have two people that are really doing the work, and time. But people that grew up with extremely narcissistic parents, we go through some stuff. We go through some hard things." Sarah said she was a pork chop in a wolf's den. That doesn't sound good, being a pork chop in a wolf's den. Soren says he's an INTJ. I'm an IN. Maybe I'm an INFJ. Yeah. So Foreigner says, check out Codependent No More. My wife is an INFP. Honey, we're almost alike, except for the P part. Gilligan says she's always felt chewed up and spit into a corner. A pork chop and fleece delicate, INFJ, that's me. Soren, INFJ, I get that sometimes too, switch back and forth. Braden James, INFJ. I know the feeling. Cool. So what basically happened was new in recovery Renda, Susan Kennelly, INFJ. New, healthier Renda was disillusioned with old, broken Mark. And now there's a new Mark, but it took a while for the new Renda to wake up the new Mark, the old Mark. So what we're doing is the new Renda is looking to get to know and to trust the new Mark. Many times, what we do with our partners is we project onto them the stuff that we really are, right? So that's what we do. I don't know if any of you have a part of you that is basically that, a part, a dissociated part, a broken off part. One of the books that I wanted to recommend is called Healing the Fragmented Selves of Trauma Survivors. Flea Delicate says INFJs are the rarest. I think I've heard that too. So we got a bunch of them on here on the show tonight. I wonder what the percentage is of how many people that are on the show here tonight. So Healing the Fragmented Selves of Trauma Survivors by Janina Fisher. is what I would recommend. And so again, what I was doing was accusing Renda of having dissociated parts, when what I've discovered is I've got some dissociated parts. Braden James says my pastor calls that is a partner in the canoe in the same direction. Jilligan says that she wonders what the usual narcissistic personality type is. I don't know. Brenda says, Mark and I are listening to a really good book, Healing the Fragmented Selves of Trauma Survivors by Janaea Fisher. So in 2015, I got to go to Milestones Treatment Center near Nashville, Tennessee. And I hope they didn't get that tornado down there at Onsite and Milestones. But when I would talk about my pain in group therapy, a little boy voice came out. And he sounds just like a little boy. And every time I talk from deep down inside me in my pain, it sounds like a little boy. And so what we've been learning is in our relationship that sometimes you have little parts, and Jilligan says the wounded inner child. You know, that's sort of a catchphrase, the wounded inner child, but it really captures what it is that we go through. So, but my wounded little boy, my wounded inner child, he doesn't like not being heard. And so when I'm not heard, I tend to get sort of stirred up. Is that what you'd call it, honey? Stirred up? Because I mean, we all want to be heard, right? But the little kid part can get overly reactive and overly edgy and be hurtful. When I'm not feeling heard, let's see if I'm like some of the rest of you. What do? Is I turn my voice up. And I say it edgier and louder and stronger. Jilligan says those deep, deep wounds that make up the foundation of who you are. Sarah says, if you're not being heard, it's frustrating and it's mad making. So, honey, that's what it is. It's mad making for me. I get mad. Renda says, and when that part gets stirred up in Mark, my little kid part shuts down completely. So, I don't know if anybody else struggles with that, of your little kid parts want to be heard. Sarah says, you know my husband, huh? But the little kid part can actually, it can actually sabotage your life. Jacqueline says, when I'm not heard, I just rage and I shut myself down completely. Jilligan says, you not being heard reminds me of how you were ignored as an infant, crying until I turned purple in the yard, not being heard. Hey, that's right. That's right. You guys watch those videos, don't you? Um, yeah. Uh, so, uh, yeah, when I don't feel heard, the little infant inside gets stirred up. And so Renda says, yes, Soren, it pisses me off when I get told, uh, who told you to say that? Yeah. So uh, when I'm in my edgy parts, what happens is uh, instead of just hearing Renda, I tend to worry about who might be triangling to her and suggesting that her therapist or her friend might have encouraged her to say something instead of just respecting what she's saying. Katie says, I feel like I'm shutting down emotionally. I don't know how to show compassion to my inner child. Renda says, I used to say I'm sorry a lot until I was taught to simply apologize and remember I'm not a sorry person because I made a mistake. So, when you understand that this tendency to dissociate and have broken off parts, it's like if you see your spouse acting edgy or reactive, it helps you to be more understanding and more gracious and offer more grace to your partner. And what I tended to do when I was a little boy, my mother told me that when I was 3 years old, that I would walk into a room and I would see her nurturing my little baby brother, Sammy, and I would go into a rage and I would slam the door and storm out of the room as a 3-year-old because I felt like my mommy was abandoning me, because she was. Soren says, that's right on, Renda. I used to say sorry a lot. People would look at me funny. It's because my mom would flip out and beat me, and that's all I could say. Sorry, 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 again and again. Flea Delicate would say, I would allow others to not apologize to me at all. Now I'm learning the opposite. I take others into account. You hold people accountable, I think is what you're saying. Sarah says, empathy gets in the way sometimes. I wish I could put it in a box for an hour. Yeah, that's a typical codependent reaction, is constantly saying, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. And you're like, dude, what are you sorry for? You didn't do anything. It's like apologizing for something that really shouldn't be apologized for. So what I'm learning in my marriage is to not emotionally cut off and storm out of a room like a 3-year-old, but to stay in the room. Another book, this is the book that Jerry Wise recommended. And that, I wonder, honey, if you could write this down so people can see it. It's called Extraordinary Relationships by Roberta Gilbert. Renda says, holding people accountable is nothing to be sorry for. Gilligan says, my dad was the one who beat us kids the most, but my mom chimed in here and there. My dad was more of a codependent, and my mother would get mad and pull the wait till your father gets home, and he would bring us back in the bedroom to whip us. But because he had been beaten by his father, his stepfather, my dad would hit the bed, and then he would say, yell, and we'd go, ow, ow, ow. He was hitting the bed, and he never, my dad, I don't think he ever whipped me. Kevin R. says, don't set yourself on fire to warm another. And that's helped him a lot. Soren says, my mother was the psychopath who beat us. My father did it when he was drunk, which is fairly often. Soren, you had a rough go, man. You really did. Fleece Delicate says, accountable feels good. Soren says, that's good of your old man. He was a very sweet man, and he never beat us, or I don't think I ever saw him in a rage, but I did see him get raged at by my mother. Extraordinary relationships, a new way of thinking about human relationships, which is a family systems approach to relationships, by Roberta M. Gilbert. So in this book, Roberta Gilbert, a family systems therapist, suggested that if you cut off from your family of origin, you'll have a tendency to cut off in all relationships in your life, especially your significant other relationship. And so taking the family systems, this would be sort of Jerry's advice, and that is, if you want to work on yourself, reconnect with your family of origin. Not if they're an active, scary, hurtful, narcissistic person. Sarah says saying I'm sorry pisses off her narcissistic brother. Man, that gets him. That's weird. It seems like it's like, why would somebody be mad about somebody saying I'm sorry? So what I've done is I've made a concerted effort to reconnect to my siblings. Both of my parents have passed. But I've got a brother in town and a sister in town, and Elizabeth is my youngest sister, and she's really delightful. She's really a good person, and I tell her that she's the most popular sibling. My wife says, take your therapist's advice and run like hell. I missed something, honey, about Soren. He said Soren, it's not applicable to you. Take your therapist's advice and run like hell. I don't know what you're reacting to there, honey. So then I have a sister who lives in Chicago who, and one Christmas, I had a little meltdown where my sister got in my closet and she took a shirt from the Air Force that my dad had when he was a master sergeant in the Air Force. And I let that get under my skin, and she took it and she kept it. And it was like a sacred item to me because it was my dad's, and she didn't ask, she just took it. But she might as well have beaten me. She might as well have killed my dog. That's a good example. Dee Dee is here. She says, hello all. It's been a while. My grandson is in the ICU, so I'm only half here. Listening but not reading. I'll be on and off. Hope you are well. Well, sorry to hear about your grandson. On Sunday, I ended up going to dinner with both Elizabeth and my sister from Chicago. And there's a reconnection going on. And then she was in town from Chicago and needed a place to stay on Sunday. So she stayed at my house. So Roberta Gilbert, extraordinary relationships. And it talks about if your tendency is to cut off emotionally, you'll do that not only with your family of origin, you'll do that in your marriage. And Renda would say, I think, that my tendency was to be in my own little world and be sort of emotionally cut off and not even really know it. So another process that Renda and I are both working on in our recovery process is, we call it sourcing ourselves. When I said I was emotionally cut off, Renda said I would agree with that assessment. Okay. Say more about that, honey, if it's okay. We talk about narcissists like to get source, from empaths, but everybody needs to get source, and the healthy thing is to source yourself. So Flea Delicate says, I don't think I'll be reuniting with my sister. It's not for everybody. I'm not suggesting that everybody should go out and reunite with narcissistic family members. I need to get a drink here. My assistant, Jeff, makes really good drinks for me, and I brought it home. They're not alcoholic drinks, by the way. So learning how to source yourself is, you feel lonely, you feel sad, you don't go find somebody to spend time with. You get comfort and security and encouragement from your very own self. Need a cough drop. You get sourced and fueled and taken care of emotionally from yourself. Renda talks about my emotional cutoff. She would say, oftentimes that I, Mark, would want attention, but I wouldn't give attention. So when I came to you having healthy needs, she would get shut down. Jillian is noticing Mr. Polly. Mr. Polly has a diaper on because he pee-pees on the rug. He can't pee-pee on the rug with his diaper on. Katie says, sometimes I have nightmares from the past emotional abuse and physical abuse that she suffered growing up. Sourcing yourself. Flea Delicate says, sourcing yourself is a good thing to keep in mind. So even though Renda and I have done tons and tons and tons of work, there's a local therapist here in Indianapolis named Bernard Baca, and he does the um, imago therapy. Jilligan says her old guy, meaning her old dog, became incontinent, and the vet found a rather large bladder stone. Oh, okay. So Renda and I have gone to on-site. We did a coupleship program there. I think I've been to on-site like 6 or 7 times. It's a really powerful place to do your work in the context of a lot of group therapy. But the most powerful thing that in my life, in terms of my day-to-day work, comes from reenacting issues in our marriage. And therapy is a blessing. It's a wonderful thing. But what Renda and I have found is the most powerful therapy is your marriage itself. And I just encourage everybody watching the show, if you were involved with somebody who was narcissistic and scary, you did that for a reason. And you were attracted to that person in order to heal yourself. And even if that person was a narcissist, you still picked them in order to have an opportunity to heal yourself. Renda says, I learned to not ask for anything, which causes problems in relationships if you don't ask for anything. If you don't ask for anything, what are you probably going to get a lot of? Not much. So one of my articles that I wrote many years ago was healthy neediness is the lifeblood of relationships. So Polly's snoring. I don't know if you guys can hear that. He's snoring away. He does a lot of sleeping. So many people look at Rose says, well, she picked a great one then, a husband to be involved with. Many of us have viewed being involved with a narcissist as some big, scary, it's like in our relationships, we were a pork chop with a wolf. So Soren says, I have that problem. I need to learn how to ask for exactly what I want and being okay if the person says no. Yeah. So there's value and there's growth and there's healing in being involved with anybody in a relationship, even somebody who is narcissistic. So it's not a waste of time. It's not good-looking honky here says it's Peter North, an old adult film star, huge fan of yours. Okay. Good looking honky. Soren says, no more Mr. Nice Guy helped him. So welcome back, good looking honky. I think you've been on the show before, good looking honky. So Harville Hendricks would say, if you're not in a relationship, to stir you up, to reenact your family of origin issues, you may not get a lot of work done. I've experienced that as a therapist, where somebody was in a red hot, dysfunctional, I got to yell and carry on when I'm reactive and I'm not being heard because my little kid gets upset. When they got a lot of work done, and there was a lot of pain and tears and motivation to get work done. But then they got out of their relationship, and the therapy sessions got boring, and they became few and far between, and not much work got done. So even if you've gotten bruised and broken and damaged in relationships with narcissistic people, there's redemption, there's healing, there's growth, there's a beautiful, positive tears. Soren says that he had a 3-month relationship that was turned into 2+ years of material for his psychologist. Every relationship is a financial windfall for that guy. It sounds like you got a good therapist, Soren, but I don't think in terms of financial windfalls, but a really broken, dysfunctional relationship can cost a lot of therapy over a lot of time. So even if your relationship doesn't thrive, and even if it's not so successful, you can still benefit from a lot of emotional healing that causes you to do really deep work, really hard work. So there's a lot of talk about our dogs. Mr. Pauly tends to bring up that kind of discussion. So Sarah says, Soren, at least you did the work. Okay. So I guess I'm just encouraging everybody to stay in your relationship and cry your tears and learn how to engage with your partner in a non-reactive fashion and not project onto your partner your own stuff. And to understand that even ugly fighting and reactivity in a relationship, it really can be positive and redemptive in the long run if you do the work. Braden James says, as a kid, playing with my narcissistic trait dad, he would regularly hold me down and almost touch his eyeball to mine and stare into my soul for 5 minutes. Ooh, that sounds really creepy. Boundary break, he questions. Yeah. So, Katie, I told you I would come back at some point in the show. And so I wanted to come back, and you had said you wanted to know how to heal from narcissistic abuse and how to heal your childhood wounds. And what I'm saying is that one of the main ways that we have a chance to heal from narcissistic abuse and heal our childhood wounds is what? Be in a relationship. If you get into a relationship, are you going to go out and pick somebody who's super healthy and who's just filled with love and sugar and fairies and sunshine? Probably not. Most of us grew up in really toxic, broken, dysfunctional families, like I said, with narcissistic parents. And that's one way to do the work, is be in a relationship and learn how to not think in terms of victim mentality, but learn how to get your focus on your own stuff and not be constantly pointing a finger at the other person. So my wife says one of the main ways that we can heal our inner child is to get in touch with that inner part and not judge it as bad. So, Katie, you had mentioned not knowing how to empathize with your wounded inner child. And that's really what Brenda was talking about there. Get in touch with that inner part and not judge that it's bad. Little Mark, who I don't think I ever used that little boy voice on any of my videos. I think that I cried some on my videos, but I don't think he ever came out and showed that little boy part so vulnerably and openly. I hope I didn't anyway. Brenda says it's about having understanding for the child that was hurt and creating safety within yourself. Part of why we go to therapy is hopefully to find a safe environment where the therapist can be safe. But what Renda's saying is have understanding for your own inner child and create safety within yourself. The book that I mentioned earlier, where is it? Healing the Fragmented Selves of Trauma Survivors by Janaea Fisher. That book states that we have to form a relationship with our parts. So does anybody out there understand this parts part and have a relationship with your vulnerable parts, your inner parts, your little kid parts? And Renda says she would reiterate that part of you is safe in the adult you, and that the adult you can protect the part. That's good stuff. Renda further says to Katie that you can email her if you'd like to discuss further at Renspire Life Coaching, Renspire Life Coaching at gmail.com. So Soren says, I think that's a big part of sourcing yourself. In the final analysis, we recognize that we can create a life that we want and safety that our child needs. Once you realize that, the anxiety goes down. So I think Flea Delicate says she was making tea. Rose says she's working on her inner child with a book by John Bradshaw, probably healing the child within. My wife says it's probably healing the child within. Honey, we spoke at exactly the same time and said exactly the same thing. So that's funny. So yes, Katie, feel free to contact Renda and talk about it further. But I just want to say again what Renda said is having understanding for the child part that was hurt and creating safety within your own self. The book Healing the Fragmented Selves of Trauma Survivors by Janaea Fisher states that we have to form a relationship with our parts. That's what was unique for me was I think I felt sort of cut off from that little boy, the one with the little boy voice. Okay, I've gotten, you guys went past me here. Soren says John Bradshaw did a meditation where the adult you goes back to rescue your child while your parents were abusing them. You give your parents back their shame and save the child. Made me cry so much. Soren, many years ago, I went to a workshop that was led by John Bradshaw. I think I saw him 2 or 3 times, but a lot of times when you show up at a workshop, they'll give you a pad of paper and they'll give you a pen. But I showed up at this workshop and they gave you a little packet of tissues. And everybody in the place used the tissues. And it was a cry fest, let me tell you. It was really cool. Renda says, in rapid eye technology, I do a meditation that several parts at different ages come together. That's cool. Can you say more about that, honey? In rapid eye technology, you do a meditation where several parts at different ages come together. Jilligan says, I visualized me doing some of the same, doing some of the things my parents did to me onto my nephew, and that helped me realize just how effed up they were. Oh, okay. So you're trying to visualize how broken and dysfunctional and scary and hurtful your parents were. So you visualize you doing it to your nephew, and that sort of woke you up. It's like we don't believe our own memories when people we don't believe our own memories when our parents abused us. But when we think of us doing it to somebody else, and it's like, oh, that's terrible. Soren says John Bradshaw was so freaking cool. I'm bummed that he died in 2016. Yeah, it's been a while since he passed away. Renda says the meditation that she does in rapid eye work is called the Circle of Light imagery. So let me open it up to any questions that anybody has. I don't have Fernando the rubber chicken. I saw him today. Fernando was in my file drawer, and I saw him down there. I should have grabbed him, and then I could have let Fernando wail. When Fernando the rubber chicken wails, he's very sad sounding. So I'm out of material and I'm begging for questions. Give it up. Or Fernando. Soren says he had chicken for dinner. This is Fernando the rubber chicken. So does anybody have any questions for me? I don't know if you guys notice it, but Jerry, when he talks, he has this really cool green screen behind him that has his logo on it. I'm going to get that pretty soon. I've got the guy making it, and I probably will have it in a couple of weeks. So trying to be like my guy, my hero, Jerry. Katie, do you think doing meditation helps abuse victims? Absolutely, positively. Meditation is one of the most healing and powerful things you can do. There's Mr. Polly. He's risen. He's moving. B. Jones, hello. What tips you give me as trauma survivor when I was 4 years old? I worked on myself for more than 5 years now, and I understand how this trauma shaped my life up to now. Insecurity. Well, that's a good question. Tips about surviving trauma when you were 4 years old. First of all, I'm sorry that you were traumatized when you were 4. And it's great that you've worked on yourself for the past 5 years. And this trauma has shaped your life by bringing about insecurity. Look at Mr. Polly move. Really, B, I would encourage you to watch all the videos on Family Tree's channel, because we cover everything, really. We cover relationship work, family of origin work. So my wife has a question. She's helping me out here. What have you learned personally about yourself through reading the book? Oh, geez, honey. I'll be honest with you, honey. I quit listening to the book halfway through, and I've been listening to some Jack Reacher books, and I've learned to sometimes I don't know. So sometimes you need a little break from the intensity of the work. I tend to work really hard and really intense. So I hope that's a good answer, honey. B says the trauma I talked about left insecurity and shame and fear. I get that. I get how that could happen. Rose says, great information tonight. I got to go and get some sleep. Good night, everybody. Oh, my goodness. So when I told my wife I quit reading the book and I read a novel instead, I got, little emojis, sort of looking around like I'm goofy. Carol Peterson, is tapping a helpful practice for narcissistic abuse? It is. Renda says tapping is very good to help. I remember recently being in conflict with my lovely wife, and she was, I don't know where she was tapping. She was tapping during the fight. And I know it was helpful to her. I know she's a big believer in that. Look at Mr. Polly move. Oh, he's getting up. Where are you going? No, he's not. Down he goes. Soren, what are ways you source yourself? That's a really good question. What are your methods and techniques? This past Saturday, I didn't have any plans to meet with friends or family, and I was feeling lonely, and I was tempted to reach out to a friend and set up a dinner or go to a movie. And so, Soren, what I did to source myself actually was just to slow down and not have to go be with somebody, but to feel the aloneness. And what I actually did was I spent about 3 hours cleaning the house. Mr. Polly needs to get to the cold side of the pillow. I think that's what he was doing, actually. My lovely wife, Renda Jo, says, what I have learned from the book is that I do not have to be afraid, because the small parts of me aren't subjected to the adult interactions. So what she's learned, this wise, loving woman, my wife, from the book that we discussed, is that I do not have to be afraid, because the small parts of me aren't subjected to the adult interactions. Gilligan says that she's never heard of sourcing yourself. Like I mentioned, we hear the word that narcissists get look for source or look for supply. That's the word we use. So basically, this is that with ourselves. We supply ourselves with meditation, with friendship, with just healthy self-care and eating right and exercise. Renda continues with information that she learned in the book. She says that I am able to protect all of my parts. And I have also learned that practicing connection with myself helps to keep me grounded. So when you're talking about, Sergio's in the house, when you're talking about sourcing yourself, that's another way of saying it, is practicing connection. Sourcing yourself is practicing connection with yourself. Sergio, hey, says, hey, Mark. Hi, Mark. What sort of advice could you give me? My mother was trapped in a yoga cult. And when I listen to yoga and meditation as something good, I have mixed feelings. I prefer to ride my bike. Sergio, let me give you some feedback. I would just ride the bike. You're probably never going to dig yoga or meditation. It's really awful that your mother was in a yoga cult. I never even heard of a yoga cult, but I can picture them. I got to tell you, Sergio, my dad would occasionally gamble, and then I would see my mother react and be super sad that my dad was gambling. And I've never been to Las Vegas, and I never will go. Now, I think I caught a plane there once or twice. I think just this past year when I went to my son's wedding, but I've never made a trip to Las Vegas because to me, Las Vegas and gambling equals yoga to you. And I don't think there's anything wrong with going to Las Vegas. I think it's fine. I don't think anybody's terrible if they go to Las Vegas. It's just not for me. And yoga is just not for you. Renda says, the small child parts of me are not interacting in adult relationships. And then Soren says, you can separate them. And look at Mr. Polly. And Renda says, even though they get triggered, my adult part can handle the danger. Renda says that book on parts is geared toward therapists, but she breaks it down to where it's really easy for everyone to understand and to implement. And she got it, and I got it also on audible.com. So, Sergio, does that make sense? That sometimes things can be ruined. Chilligan says, that's sad. My dad was an alcoholic, and it took me some time just to be okay, just being around alcohol. But it finally was okay, just being around it. Soren's going to get the parts book. It's really cool. Again, Renda says it's healing the fragmented parts of trauma survivors. As trauma survivors, we all have parts, and them parts are they're really primitive, and it helps to be intimately connected and aware of all of the parts of ourself. So, yes, it is by Janaea Fisher, Soren. So, Gilligan says alcohol really wasn't the problem. The problem really was my dad. My wife says, I still, to this day, cannot stand the smell of beer due to my abuse from my uncle. I know this, that if I'm out on a date with my wife and I have a beer, it's probably not going to end the way I'd like it to, because it triggers her. Just the beer smell triggers her, just like Las Vegas triggers me and yoga triggers Sergio. Renda says, I can tolerate being around it because I have the tools to soothe my child that suffered that abuse. So, okay. So, we have about 10 minutes to go in the show tonight. I wanted to remind everybody that in 2 weeks is St. Patty's Day, and Jerry Wise is, he's been in San Francisco, and he's been having a ball, it looks like. Every time I look on my Facebook page, I don't know why, but Jerry always comes up first. And He's been in Big Sur. He's been going over the bridge. Sergio says, yes, you are right, Mark. Perhaps Tai Chi would be better for me. I did go to Reno recently, and I didn't like it. Renda and I stayed in a what do you call it? Casino hotel. They had a really good buffet, but there were gambling machines strewn about the hotel. So it wasn't my cup of tea, but it was Reno, and it was a cheap hotel. And I don't think I'd ever been to a nicer buffet. We pigged out at that buffet, let me tell you. So, like I said, I don't know what Jerry will be speaking on in 2 weeks. I just know it'll be good. Gilligan says, I'm the same way with cigarettes. I know it's not fair. It's not fair to regular smoking people, but it reminds me of some awful people in my life, but I just keep it to myself. Soren says, Jerry is a party animal. I love it. I want to be like him. Big Pimpkin. Big Pimpin, not Pimpkin. Big Pimpin. Is that a cool phrase, Soren? Big Pimpin? Yeah, Jerry frequently has been in California. And when he goes on vacation, he always rents really beautiful sports cars or luxury cars, like a Rolls Royce or a Mercedes or something. Big Pimpin' was cool back in the day. Jacqueline has a question. She says, he or she, I think it's she. I've been married to my narcissistic husband about 20 years. And I noticed that he's becoming me and I'm becoming him. I've been married 20 years and I've noticed that he's becoming me and I'm becoming him. Yeah. You just described a 20, 30 years marriage. I become him and he becomes me. That's really true. That happens. It happens. I don't think you're saying you're becoming narcissistic. I think you're saying that that in little ways. Sarah says that we're going to San Francisco. No, we were going to San Francisco. Instead, she had a triple bypass. I would go for San Francisco, but the triple bypass saved you, so we're glad you're here, Sarah. Any more questions before we wrap up? Let's hear it for Renda. Renda, you gave some good feedback to people tonight, so thank you for hosting via messaging. Part of why I'm here in Indianapolis is my daughter, who is bipolar, and now she's settled into, she's not manic, but she's settled into a schizophrenic state. And so I see her as often as she'll let me see her. Sometimes she's pretty antisocial. And we go to float tanks together. And that's very soothing. But that's partially, I'm here to as support for my ex not having to do all the work with my daughter. And Brenda and I, in our work together, have needed occasionally a little bit of space. So we're doing both. We're getting some healthy space, and I'm hanging out with my daughter. So Soren says, I'm sorry to hear that, Mark. My brother has paranoid schizophrenia. It's very hard. It really is. It's horrifically hard. Where did Mr. Polly go? He got up and left. Mr. Polly has left the house. I think Mr. Polly has modeled for all of us. It's time to wrap up. It's getting to be about 9:45, and Jacqueline says, this may sound crazy, but I was diagnosed with bipolar and healed everything on the keto diet, got off my meds, and now no bipolar. Actually, Jacqueline, that doesn't sound crazy. I've used the keto diet, and you wouldn't know it by now. I've gained a pound or two since then, but I understand that the keto diet can be tremendously healing physically. That it's even people have been healed of cancer sometimes with the keto diet. Soren says the fat lady sings and the dog leaves the room. It's the same thing. So anyway, thank you everybody for hanging out with us tonight. I hope that you learned some things about healing your wounds. One of the best ways you can heal your wounds is get married and hang out with your spouse and go to therapy with your spouse and listen to books with yourself. I hear you, Gilligan, about the bladder thing. He's got something going on with his kidneys. I don't know. Flea says she's having a problem with her connection. Mine was getting a little jumpy there for a while. I thought I was frozen, but it unfroze itself. So, by the way, I don't know if you guys can see behind me that picture. My daughter painted that, and she called it absolution. Isn't that something, that the picture of the young woman, absolution? You can't see it very well. Let me see if I can turn this off. Yeah, still can't see it. Okay, still can't see it. Darn it all. So I'm turning off the lights and we're winding down. Foreigner says, Auf Wiedersehen. Auf Wiedersehen. Am I saying it right? Auf Wiedersehen. Auf Wiedersehen. Gilligan says, I've learned so much. I was a complete wreck before I found your YouTube channel. Thank you so much. Okay, Amanda, thank you very much. I'm glad you enjoyed it, and I'm glad you learned some things. Katie, you're welcome for us hosting. Sarah says, God bless you. Stick in there, guys. We are sticking in. We're very committed to the process. Auf Wiedersehen. Good night, everybody. We'll see you. I'll see you in 4 weeks. Bye. I'm hitting end and it's not ending.